Thunder rolled across the Manhattan skyline, rattling the windows of the lavish penthouse perched on the Upper East Side. Elena Monroe Stone stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass, her reflection fractured by lightning flashes. On a normal day, she would have been wrapped in the warm promise of her husband's love. Christopher Stone, a self-made billionaire adored by the public for his philanthropy. Yet, a secret was about to unravel, one that would rip their seemingly perfect world apart. When Christopher lied to shield his mistress, Elena walked away without looking back. Little did he know, losing her would spark a desperation he never imagined, turning his empire into a house of cards. Born into a middle-class family, Elena grew up with a love for books and a strong sense of empathy, values that remained unchanged even after marrying billionaire Christopher Stone. Christopher Stone, a self-made billionaire from Queens, built Syntratech into a global empire, earning praise from business leaders and the media alike. Their love story began at a charity event, where Christopher was instantly drawn to Elena's kindness. 6 months later, he proposed under the moonlit skies of Lake Como. At first, married life was idyllic. They traveled the globe, from strolling hand-in-hand on the Champs-Élysées in Paris to attending black-tie fundraisers for children's education in Nairobi. Elena kept her identity, a lover of literature, a volunteer in community libraries, and a dedicated partner who wanted to use their newfound wealth for good. Christopher always insisted that Elena was his moral compass, the anchor to keep him grounded amid the frenzy of corporate success. But beneath the glitter of press coverage and the philanthropic headlines, cracks began to appear. As Syntratech expanded, Christopher's once modest approach to life morphed. He developed a taste for the extravagant, collecting rare wines, commissioning custom supercars, and hosting celebrity chefs like Massimo Bottura for private dinners. Elena watched her husband transform from the man who once told her, "I only need a modest apartment to be happy," to someone who sought the biggest and best in every aspect of life. Though concerned, Elena loved Christopher and hoped this was a passing phase. However, she couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. He stayed late at the Syntratech headquarters almost every night, frequently traveling without much explanation. When he did come home, exhaustion replaced their once playful banter. Phone calls were abruptly cut short, and cryptic text messages kept him glued to his screen. One evening, Elena overheard Christopher whispering on his phone in the library. She caught fragments. "Don't worry, I'll handle it. Elena mustn't know. Soon." Her heart hammered. She confronted him afterward, but he dismissed her concerns with a tight-lipped smile, blaming Syntratech boardroom dramas and shareholder disputes. Still, a gnawing feeling told Elena that the man she knew and loved was slowly slipping away. She tried bridging the gap by planning candlelit dinners at home, surprising him at the office and offering to help with philanthropic events. But each attempt met with half-hearted interest or outright avoidance. Someone seemed to have captured Christopher's attention more than his own wife. What Elena didn't yet know was that a new figure had entered Christopher's life, quietly stepping in behind the scenes, a woman with ambition, cunning, and a willingness to stoke the billionaire's ego like no one else. Soon enough, the price of Christopher's deception would become staggeringly high, threatening not just his marriage, but the foundation of everything he had built. Her name was Alexandra Lexi Harrington, a striking blonde socialite with an Ivy League education and a reputation for following money. She originally hailed from Boston, the daughter of a prominent neurosurgeon and a former model who parlayed her looks into a posh wedding. Lexi grew up in private schools and exclusive country clubs, learning early on how to navigate high society circles. She met Christopher Stone at a Silicon Valley gala, where she was introduced as a venture capital liaison. To most people, Lexi seemed simply charismatic. She exuded confidence, had a knack for charming, influential men, and could talk about anything from high-speed rail systems to the latest runway fashion. Beneath that polished exterior, though, was a relentless opportunist who had set her sights on Christopher almost from the moment she learned of his net worth. Lexi Harrington, an ambitious socialite, quickly found her way into Christopher's life, disguising her seduction as business strategy. Restless in his marriage, he let himself be drawn into her orbit. Within weeks, Lexi and Christopher established a clandestine relationship. He rationalized it as business partnership, though he knew deep down it strayed dangerously close to emotional entanglement. When he visited Zurich to court new investors, Lexi appeared at his five-star hotel, not only with proposals, but also with an uncanny ability to soothe his anxiety. She offered him unbridled admiration, something he felt Elena was no longer giving him, though this was hardly true. Elena's love was steadfast, but Christopher was blinded by Lexi's glamorous illusions and false compliments. Their affair escalated quickly. Private dinners in corner tables at Michelin-starred restaurants, weekend escapades under the guise of business trips, and high-end shopping sprees where Christopher lavished Lexi with gifts. She was cunning enough to keep her presence discreet. She avoided paparazzi hotspots and used her father's name rather than Christopher's at luxury boutiques. Yet, there was a constant risk of exposure. Cintratec's board members had begun noticing Christopher's recent absences and unusual decisions. Mark Cuban, one of the earliest investors, privately expressed concerns that Christopher's personal life might be interfering with corporate strategy. Bill Gates, who admired Christopher's philanthropic side, invited him to a closed-door roundtable in Seattle, only to find Christopher distracted and unprepared. Elena, too, felt the shift in her husband's demeanor. She sensed that his secrets were growing bigger, that the tension in their penthouse was more than just typical business stress. She didn't yet know Lexi's name, but she recognized the signs of betrayal. The guarded phone calls, the subtle scent of perfume on his suits, the missing hours he could never fully explain. One night, after Christopher returned from an alleged overnight meeting with overseas partners, Elena noticed a foreign beauty product advertisement in his briefcase. A scribbled note read, "Miss you. Next time, let's go to Bali. L." Her heart sank. Though Christopher was quick to snatch the paper away, claiming it was just marketing material, Elena's suspicions solidified. With each passing day, the lines of truth and deceit blurred. Christopher convinced himself that he could keep both women in his life. Elena as the devoted wife who stabilized his public image, and Lexi as the exciting mistress, fueling his lust for power and success. He had no idea how close he was to losing everything he genuinely loved, or how unstoppable Lexi's ambition truly was. Elena could no longer ignore the changes in Christopher. She found herself double-checking his credit card statements and noticing unaccounted expenses, luxury brands she never used, restaurant bills in cities she knew Christopher hadn't visited with her. As her suspicions grew, Elena tried to focus on her philanthropic work. But when she found an intimate note in Christopher's briefcase, she knew the truth. He was cheating. Ironically, while the public saw her as Christopher's philanthropic soulmate, behind closed doors, she felt like a stranger in her own marriage. To gather clarity, Elena confided in her closest friend, Alicia Thompson, a journalist for the New York Times. Alicia had known Elena since college. They shared a dorm room at Barnard and had remained confidants through every milestone. When Elena tearfully told Alicia about the suspicious notes and Christopher's erratic behavior, Alicia urged caution. "Don't jump to conclusions," she said. "But if you feel something is off, you have every right to find out what's going on." Alicia introduced Elena to a private investigator named Marcus Delacroix, a former police detective with a reputation for discretion. Elena was hesitant about crossing that line, but desperation pushed her forward. She needed proof, one way or another, to either quell her fears or confirm them. Marcus agreed to begin surveillance quietly, promising Elena that no detail would be too small. Days turned into a tense routine. Elena would continue her philanthropic work during the day, attend social events with Christopher at night, and then share whatever odd details she noticed with Marcus. Christopher's phone behavior was especially telling. He often slipped into the hallway for calls or texted someone late at night in hushed tones. Once, Elena found a silk scarf in Christopher's car, a brand she didn't wear. He claimed it was a sample from a fashion event he sponsored. Finally, after 2 weeks of discreet investigation, Marcus scheduled a meeting with Elena at a quiet cafe near Central Park. Nervously stirring her cappuccino, Elena waited for Marcus to speak. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. Christopher stepping out of an upscale hotel in Soho with a woman. They were leaning close, their faces lit by the neon sign of the entrance, leaving little room for innocence. In another photo, the pair was entering a private lounge that Elena recognized as a members-only club Christopher had once mentioned wanting to take her to. Elena felt her heart plunge. The images depicted moments that were undeniably romantic. An arm wrapped around the waist, a tender smile exchanged under the glow of street lamps. The woman's features were clearly visible, her blonde hair elegantly styled in a chignon. Marcus quietly handed Elena another page, a background check on Alexandra Harrington. It documented her wealthy family background and her pattern of short-lived yet financially beneficial relationships with powerful men. Elena's breath caught as tears gathered in her eyes. So, it's real. He's cheating. A part of her had clung to the hope that maybe Christopher was innocent, that these suspicious signs had benign explanations. But photographic proof left no room for illusions. Marcus's voice was solemn. "I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Stone. I can dig for more details if you want. Dates, times, bank transactions." Elena shook her head. "No," she whispered, closing the envelope. "I've seen enough." She left the cafe in a daze, tears cutting cold tracks down her cheeks in the brisk afternoon wind. The city's usual hustle, the honking cabs, the street vendors calling out, felt distant. All she heard was the hammering of her own heart, trying to make sense of the betrayal. Returning to the penthouse, Elena confronted a swirl of emotions: rage, heartbreak, sorrow, and a strange sense of relief that at least she now knew the truth. Yet, the question remained. What next? Does she confront Christopher, demanding the respect she deserves, or does she quietly exit the stage, leaving him to the mistress and the illusions that came with her? Little did Elena know, this was only the beginning of a tempest that would shake the Stone Empire to its core. Because Lexi Harrington had her own ambitions that reached far beyond simply becoming Christopher's mistress. And when Christopher saw the true consequences of his actions, panic would be just the first emotion to overwhelm him. Elena spent a sleepless night, staring at the city lights, contemplating the best course of action. She remembered their wedding vows, to love and to cherish, in good times and bad. Christopher had broken those vows in the most personal way possible. Could there be any redemption? When the sun rose, Elena steeled herself. She wanted clarity, some raw, unfiltered explanation. So she waited until Christopher was home that evening, presumably after another late meeting, and asked him to sit down in their living room. Warm orange lamplight fell across the plush sofa, but there was an icy tension in the air. "Chris," she began, voice wavering, "I know about Alexandra Harrington." Christopher's eyes flashed with panic. He tried to recover, feigning ignorance. "Alexandra who? I meet countless people in—" "Don't lie to me," Elena interrupted, thrusting the envelope of photos onto the coffee table. One of the pictures slid out, capturing Christopher's arm around Lexi's waist. "I hired a private investigator. Explain this." Christopher's face paled. He was silent for a long moment, swallowing hard. Then he launched into a rambling apology. "It's not what it looks like. She's an investor, and we—" "Stop," Eleanor snapped. "I'm not a fool. Don't disrespect me with half-baked excuses." Defeated, Christopher slumped forward, his elbows on his knees, face cradled in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. She was helping me secure deals, and it turned into something else." He glanced up, tears forming. "I never stopped loving you, Elena. You have to believe me." She felt a sharp ache in her chest. Part of her wanted to hold him, to ease both their pains, but the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. "Loving me? You humiliated me, lied to me. Do you have any idea how destroyed I feel right now?" Christopher reached out to take her hand, but she pulled away. He looked like a man drowning, searching for a lifeline. I swear I'll end it. Whatever it takes. Please, I can't lose you." Elena stared at him, her mind a whirlwind. Despite the overwhelming desire to walk away, a voice inside her whispered, "Give him one chance to prove himself." They had built a life together. She had believed in him when no one else did. But this couldn't be swept under the rug. "All right," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow. "I need two things. First, you end it with Lexi immediately. No contact, no business deals, nothing. Second, you go to couples therapy with me. We'll figure out if this marriage can be saved." Christopher exhaled, relief bleeding into his expression. "Done. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes." Elena studied his face, searching for sincerity. She saw desperation and fear that he might truly lose everything. "One more lie," she cautioned, "and I'm gone." Over the next few days, Christopher claimed to cut ties with Lexi. He cancelled alleged meetings, blocked her number, and had an awkward conversation with Cintratec's board about pivoting their European expansion strategy. Elena scheduled therapy sessions with Dr. Marissa Hill, a renowned psychologist who specialized in helping high-profile couples. Christopher attended reluctantly at first, shifting in his seat as Dr. Hill probed at the roots of his infidelity. However, each step forward felt like trudging through quicksand. Elena found no peace in Christopher's apologies. She'd catch him staring at his phone, face torn. Once, she discovered him alone in the study, holding a tiny velvet box. Inside was an expensive bracelet she suspected was for Lexi, though he claimed it was a gift for Elena he'd forgotten to give. The uneasy feeling in her gut told her he was still entangled with his mistress, no matter how many times he swore otherwise. In truth, Christopher's attempts to break away from Lexi were half-hearted. She had woven herself too deeply into his life and business. Lexi was not the type to fade quietly. She had leveraged personal connections to Cintratec's biggest potential investors, meaning cutting her off might also sever tens of millions in funding. Moreover, a twisted sense of loyalty and lust kept Christopher from dropping the relationship entirely. As for Lexi, she had no intention of letting him go. She saw a future with Christopher, one where she ascended to a status even higher than Elena's. If that meant undermining his marriage, so be it. And if Christopher hesitated, she had contingency plans to make sure she stayed indispensable to his empire. For now, Elena clung to the fragile hope that therapy and sincerity might fix the cracks. She had given Christopher a clear ultimatum: choose me and rebuild our marriage, or lose me forever. But as the days dragged on, she began to suspect that her husband was only telling her what she wanted to hear. Another lie in a web that was about to entangle them all. As Christopher fumbled to maintain his facade of contrition at home, Lexi Harrington moved swiftly to protect her own interests. The moment Christopher told her he needed to pause their relationship, she recognized it as a feeble ploy to mollify Eleanor. Lexi decided to play a long game, a game she was skilled at from years of manipulating wealthy men. She scheduled private meetings with Syntratech board members and top investors, painting a picture of Christopher's diminished focus and unfortunate personal constraints. Lexi claimed that she alone had the connections and the clarity to ensure Syntratech's expansion didn't stall. She dropped hints that Christopher was letting emotional drama overshadow corporate priorities, effectively eroding confidence in him as CEO. In a slick move, Lexi forged an alliance with Jonathan Pierce, a cunning investment magnate who had always found Christopher's idealistic approach somewhat naive. Pierce recognized an opportunity. If Christopher faltered, a corporate coup could place someone more aligned with pure profit over philanthropic detours. Lexi pitched herself as a liaison, but her ambition ran deeper. She wanted to position herself as the power behind the throne. With Christopher compromised, she could dictate the future of Syntratech. Late one night, Lexi invited Christopher to a clandestine dinner in a private townhouse on the Upper West Side, claiming an urgent business matter that couldn't wait. Torn between Eleanor's ultimatum and Lexi's repeated calls, Christopher found himself unable to resist. He rationalized it. Just a short meeting, purely professional. If Lexi had crucial information about potential investors or board members, he needed to hear it, especially now that Syntratech was rumored to be nearing a multi-billion-dollar expansion deal. When Christopher arrived, Lexi greeted him in a form-fitting black dress, glass of champagne in hand. A small feast of gourmet dishes from Per Se lay spread out on a marble table. The opulence and the sensual tension hovered in the air, flustering Christopher despite his feigned indifference. "You shouldn't have called me," Christopher began, trying to sound annoyed. But Lexi's soft laugh disarmed him. "You're here, aren't you?" she purred, taking his coat. "We have business to discuss. Besides, it's safer talking here than at a restaurant with prying cameras." Over the sumptuous meal, Lexi revealed troubling news. Jonathan Pierce and a faction of shareholders were questioning Christopher's leadership amid rumors of personal scandal. "They're worried about how your marriage drama might affect our negotiations," she said, swirling her champagne. Christopher tensed. "That's private. It has no bearing on Syntratech." Lexi raised a brow. "High-stakes investments are often about trust and stability. If they see you as unstable, they'll shift their money to a competitor. That's why you need me, Chris. I can keep them on board, if you let me." He hesitated, picking at his food. "Look, I told you, I can't continue this. It's complicated with Elena. We're in therapy, and I'm trying to do right by her." Lexi feigned a pout. "Do you think she'll forgive you so easily?" She leaned closer, letting her perfume and presence overwhelm him. "Is she worth sacrificing everything you've built? Because if you push me away, you lose more than just me. You could lose the entire European deal, maybe even your CEO position." A swirl of guilt and panic churned in Christopher's gut. Yes, he wanted to mend his marriage, but Syntratech was his life's work. Could he risk losing top-tier investors if he cast Lexi aside? Sensing his hesitation, Lexi slid her hand over his. "Let me help you. Stay close to me. Keep me in the loop, and I'll ensure the board doesn't turn on you. Your empire remains strong, and we can handle our relationship in whatever way you see fit." He swallowed, torn between his vow to Elena and the gravitational pull of Lexi's promise. Eventually, he nodded with a resigned sigh. "Just business," he mumbled, more to convince himself than her. "We'll keep it purely business." Lexi's eyes gleamed. She leaned in, kissing his cheek gently. "Of course," she whispered, making sure her lips grazed his skin a second longer than necessary. Walking away from that townhouse, Christopher felt sick. He'd betrayed Elena's trust yet again, forging a secret pact with the very woman who threatened his marriage. In his mind, he told himself it was a temporary measure to protect Syntratech, but deep down, he knew he was still lying. To Elena, to himself, and to the moral code he once upheld. Meanwhile, Lexi reveled in her victory. She had Christopher exactly where she wanted him. Now all that remained was to systematically dismantle his marriage, step by step, until she could claim her place by his side, publicly and without opposition. In the weeks that followed, Christopher pretended to redouble his efforts at repairing his marriage. He accompanied Elena to their scheduled therapy sessions, offering apologies and even tears. Dr. Marissa Hill probed the reasons behind his infidelity, challenging him to reflect on his ambition, insecurities, and the pressure of being a public figure. Elena watched him struggle to articulate his remorse, uncertain whether it was genuine or merely a performance. She had become more observant, studying his body language, noting the anxious glances at his phone during therapy breaks. Still, part of her clung to hope. She'd married him for better or worse, and she wanted to believe that love could triumph over betrayal. To show Elena he cared, Christopher planned a weekend trip to their country estate in Vermont. The property featured a cozy lodge surrounded by pine trees, a far cry from the hustle of Manhattan. There, they hiked scenic trails, cooked simple meals, and stargazed by a crackling fire pit. For brief, fleeting moments, it felt like the early days of their marriage, when the simplest of joys brought them close. Late one night, after making love in front of the fireplace, Eleanor curled into Christopher's arms. "I miss us," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I miss the days when you'd come home and tell me every little detail of your day, and we'd laugh about silly things." Christopher stroked her hair, guilt gnawing at him. "I know," he sighed. "I miss that too. Let's focus on rebuilding, one step at a time." Despite the sweet words, Christopher's phone buzzed periodically. Whenever he saw Lexi's name flash across the screen, a knot tightened in his stomach. He'd promised Elena he had cut ties, but Lexi's hold on his business future, and if he was honest, on his desires, remained unbroken. The day before they left Vermont, Elena sat on the porch, sipping coffee as dawn broke. She felt a faint sense of optimism, believing they'd reached a turning point. Christopher seemed more attentive, more present. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer for healing. Then she spotted his phone on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up with an incoming text. Curiosity overcame her, or was it a protective instinct? She approached the device, seeing Lexi Harrington's name. The message preview read, "Missed you at the meeting last night. When can we talk? Investors are waiting." A jolt of adrenaline shot through Elena. The lies had continued. Her optimism shattered in an instant. She picked up the phone, seeing an entire chain of messages from Lexi referencing secret investor calls, shared dinners, and cryptic mentions of our next step. Some of them hinted at intimate details that had nothing to do with business. Christopher had lied again. Elena's trembling fingers nearly dropped the phone. She felt a suffocating rush of anger and despair. In a blur, she marched to the bedroom where Christopher was packing. He turned, startled by her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, voice tinged with alarm. She held up the phone, the screen still displaying Lexi's latest text. "I can't believe you," she said, her voice shaking. "You promised me you ended things. It's obvious you never did." Christopher's face fell, guilt spreading across his features like a dark stain. "Elena, wait. It's not what—" She threw the phone onto the bed, eyes flashing with fury. "Don't you dare feed me that line again. Stop insulting my intelligence." He opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of his deception hung in the air. Elena's breathing turned ragged as she spun on her heel, hastily gathering her things. "I'm done," she spat, tears streaming down her face. "You can have your mistress, your investors, your empire. I won't be a part of this facade." Christopher reached for her, regret flooding him. "Elena, please, I love you. Give me—" "Enough," she shouted, voice echoing in the cabin. "I've given you every chance. You've thrown them all away." With that, she stormed out, slamming the wooden door behind her. Seconds later, he heard her car engine roar to life, gravel crunching under tires as she sped off down the winding road. Christopher stood in the silent cabin, shock and terror gripping him. For the first time, he truly understood that Eleanor might be gone for good. He sank onto the bed, burying his head in his hands. The haunting realization washed over him. He had sacrificed his marriage for a mistress, and now his wife was lost. In the days following Elena's departure, Christopher found himself in a nightmarish limbo. Without Elena, the penthouse felt empty. Haunted by memories, Christopher finally realized he had lost the one thing money couldn't buy: her love. Cintratec's board demanded progress reports on the European expansion, and Lexi was still whispering about new investor deals. Caught in the riptide of corporate obligations, Christopher tried to keep himself afloat, but everything felt meaningless without Elena by his side. Word of the separation leaked to the tabloids. Speculative headlines blazed, "Billionaire Stone in marital crisis. Where is Elena Monroe Stone?" The philanthropic community, which had admired their couple's synergy, whispered about the rumored affair. Christopher's phone rang incessantly. Family, close friends, even Bill Gates's office reached out, inquiring about the sudden turmoil. He avoided calls from Lexi for a time, his anger at her overshadowed by self-loathing. When he finally answered, she played the concerned partner. "Chris, I'm here for you," she cooed. "I can help you with the board, with the press." He snapped back, "This is partly your fault." But even as he said the words, he knew the blame truly rested on his own shoulders. Meanwhile, Elena found refuge at her parents' home in upstate New York. Peter and Clarissa Monroe welcomed her with open arms, offering her a childhood bedroom that still had posters of old Broadway shows tacked on the walls. She spent the first few days in tears, but gradually, the quiet of her hometown soothed her raw nerves. She revisited the local library where her mother volunteered, reacquainting herself with simpler joys. Crisp autumn leaves, fresh apple cider, the hum of small-town life. Yet, heartbreak shadowed her. She missed the sense of purpose that came from managing philanthropic endeavors with Christopher. She even missed the man she once knew, his laugh, his spontaneous gestures, the love that had seemed so genuine. Her phone buzzed frequently with Christopher's attempts to contact her. She ignored most of them, reading the text previews through tear-clouded eyes. Each message was an apology or a plea. "I made the biggest mistake. Please come back. I love you. We can fix this." At night, when insomnia kept her awake, Eleanor composed letters she never sent. In them, she vented her rage, sorrow, and confusion. She wanted to believe in second chances, but how could she trust Christopher after such repeated betrayals? One afternoon, she received a visit from Alicia Thompson, her journalist friend. Alicia brought coffee and sympathy, urging Elena to speak her truth if the tabloids continued to spin rumors. But Elena refused. "I have no interest in airing our private mess to the public," she said firmly. "He might be a liar, but I won't stoop to humiliating him." Meanwhile, Christopher made grand gestures from a distance. He sent bouquets of Elena's favorite lilies to her parents' home, letters professing undying love, even tried to deposit money into her personal account, an act Elena found insulting. She returned the money, refused the deliveries, and avoided him at every turn. Despite her silence, Elena wasn't at peace. A swirling vortex of anger and longing raged within her. Part of her wanted him to suffer, to realize the full extent of his loss. Another part, the one that still remembered their wedding day, whispered, "Could he truly change? Is there any redemption?" But for now, the answer remained elusive. With every passing day, Christopher's panic grew. For the first time in his life, he faced a crisis that no amount of money or corporate pull could fix. He had betrayed the one person who loved him unconditionally, and winning her back would require more than empty promises or extravagant gifts. It would require humility, genuine remorse, and an unflinching willingness to dismantle the life he had built around Lexi Harrington. Christopher had reached his breaking point. He was losing Elena, his public reputation was teetering, and Cintrotech's board expressed growing dissatisfaction. The final blow came when he discovered that Lexi Harrington, far from being his ally, was actively lobbying board members to consider replacing him as CEO. She'd spun a narrative about Christopher's personal turmoil, jeopardizing the company's expansion. Jonathan Pierce, always hungry for power, was rumored to be drafting a motion to oust Christopher. Locked in his office at Cintrotech's Manhattan Tower, Christopher pored over internal memos and investor notes. His phone buzzed. Lexi calling again. Anger boiled inside him. He recalled their last conversation, where she had cleverly sidestepped any direct claim to sabotage, yet had strongly implied that if he didn't remain in her orbit, the board might side against him. "I'm your lifeline here, Chris," she had murmured. "Don't push me away." But Christopher realized the truth. Lexi was an opportunist. She thrived on his vulnerability. She had no loyalty to him beyond what served her ambitions. "I was such a fool," he thought bitterly. He had risked his marriage for a woman who would discard him the moment it suited her, and in the process, he'd destroyed his bond with Eleanor, the one real treasure in his life. He stood, heart pounding, and walked to the window overlooking the city. The skyline that once symbolized his triumph now felt suffocating. He dialed Lexi, ignoring the knot in his stomach. When she answered, her voice was silky with anticipation. "Finally, I've been waiting to—" "Stop," Christopher interjected, tone cold. "We're done, Lexi. You and I, whatever this was, it's over. No more calls, no more deals." A pause, then Lexi's voice turned icy. "Don't be rash. If you cut me off, who's going to convince the board you're stable? I hold the keys to half the investor groups you've courted." "Not anymore," Christopher replied, his resolve hardening. "I'll handle the board myself, and if they oust me, so be it. I won't be blackmailed." She let out a mocking laugh. "Fine, but you'll regret this, I promise." With trembling fingers, Christopher ended the call. He felt both terror and relief, like a man stepping off a cliff, unsure if he'd fly or plummet. But he knew this was a necessary step. He'd made enough catastrophic decisions by letting Lexi remain in his life. That evening, he called an emergency board meeting. He looked each member in the eye. People he had known for years, some of whom had placed unwavering faith in his leadership. He confessed that recent personal issues had clouded his judgment, but he swore to realign Syntratech with its core mission: innovation, integrity, and philanthropic impact. Jonathan Pierce was visibly skeptical, but Christopher refused to yield the floor. He shared a strategic plan for the European expansion that didn't rely on Lexi's networks, highlighting new partnerships with philanthropic donors and ESG-focused investors that Elena had once advocated for. He offered to resign if the board had lost confidence, and in a surprising move of humility, he urged them to do what was best for the company, even if it meant letting him go. The room was silent for a moment, tension thick. Then Mark Cuban, who had been on the fence, cleared his throat. "I invested in you, Chris, because you had vision and heart. If you're telling me you can right this ship and stay true to your original values, I'm willing to give you another chance." Some others murmured agreement. Pierce glowered, but he lacked the majority to force a leadership change. Christopher left the boardroom feeling lighter, though the real battle was far from over. He knew he needed to prove himself, both to the board and to the woman he had betrayed. He considered rushing to upstate New York to beg Elena's forgiveness in person, but something told him grand gestures alone would not suffice. She'd already seen how easily he made and broke promises. Instead, Christopher returned home to an empty penthouse. He sat at the dining table, once shared with Elena, drafting a series of letters, one to the philanthropic organizations they supported together, reaffirming his commitment and seeking Elena's input, another to Elena's parents, apologizing for any distress he'd caused them, and finally, a personal letter to Elena, detailing his remorse and the changes he intended to make. It was a single step, but a genuine one. By midnight, he mailed the letters, uncertain if they would even reach Elena's forgiving side. But in that moment, Christopher felt a spark of hope. He had severed ties with Lexi, faced his board, and begun rectifying his mistakes. For the first time since the affair began, he felt like he was no longer lying to the world or to himself. Upstate New York cast a serene backdrop for Elena's heartbreak. She spent her days trying to piece herself together, volunteering at a local shelter and helping her parents with chores around their modest home. The crisp autumn air and the changing foliage offered a quiet kind of therapy, but her nights remained sleepless. Weeks had passed since she stormed out of the Vermont cabin, yet the memory was still vivid. She wondered if Christopher's tears were genuine or just another manipulation. A swirl of conflicting emotions, love, anger, disappointment, kept her from making any definite decisions. One crisp morning, Elena woke to find a letter slipped under the front door, delivered by a private courier. It bore Christopher's neat handwriting. Heart-pounding, she carried the envelope to her childhood desk. She hesitated before opening it, steeling herself for another round of heartbreak. Yet, as she read Christopher's words, something in her chest tightened. He laid out his soul, expressing shame for letting Lexi manipulate him and letting greed overshadow the love they once shared. He mentioned the emergency board meeting, how he'd admitted his failings, cut ties with Lexi, and reaffirmed his philanthropic focus. His plea for a second chance radiated through the pages. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend every day proving I can be a better man." Elena pressed the letter to her chest, tears threatening to fall. She felt Christopher's torment and recognized a spark of sincerity. But could she trust him again? One letter doesn't erase months of deceit, she reminded herself. That afternoon, her friend Alicia Thompson dropped by, carrying grocery bags. They set about making a simple pasta dish together. At the kitchen table, Elena opened up about Christopher's letter. "He's clearly remorseful," Alicia remarked, nibbling on a slice of bread. "But is it enough?" "I don't know," Elena admitted, shoulders slumping. "I believed him before, and he stabbed me in the back. How do I know this time is different?" Alicia stirred the pasta sauce. "You take it slow. Maybe you meet him face to face and see if his actions match his words." Elena bristled at the thought. She had left to protect her heart, yet curiosity and an ache for closure gnawed at her. If Christopher was truly making changes, she might find it in her to forgive, but not forget. Later that day, she received a call from Dr. Marissa Hill, the couple's therapist. Dr. Hill gently asked how she was coping and mentioned that Christopher had visited for a solo session. "He seemed genuine in his regret, Eleanor. He admitted to being addicted to the thrill of success and attention, losing sight of what was real." Eleanor sank onto the sofa, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of feeling like I can't trust my own husband," she whispered. "Only you can decide what's next," Dr. Hill said softly. "But if there's a part of you that still cares, perhaps come in for one session. Just to talk, no commitments." That night, Elena sat by the window of her childhood bedroom, looking at the moonlit trees. She opened Christopher's letter again, noticing how he'd also included a note about new philanthropic strategies, referencing the possibility of establishing reading programs in schools across Africa, a cause dear to Elena's heart. He wrote, "Your vision always inspired me. I want to honor that again." A mixture of longing and caution tugged at her. She recalled the laughter they once shared, the passion that united them, the countless nights brainstorming ways to make the world better. The question remained, was that man still there, buried beneath the mistakes? Finally, Eleanor made a decision. She would return to the city, not to reconcile blindly, but to look Christopher in the eye and see if he truly had changed. If so, maybe they could rebuild their foundation on honest ground. If not, she'd walk away for good. She'd arranged to see Dr. Hill together, at least for closure. With her heart in turmoil, she packed a small bag the following morning. The journey back to Manhattan began, each mile heavy with hope and uncertainty. The city skyline loomed into view as Elena's train pulled into Grand Central Terminal. Anxiety surged within her. Manhattan, once her glamorous playground, now felt like a battleground strewn with painful memories. Yet she pressed on, determined to confront Christopher and her own unresolved feelings. She checked into a small boutique hotel in Midtown, avoiding the penthouse she once called home. After freshening up, she called Christopher, letting him know she was in the city. His breath caught audibly. "Eleanor, thank you for letting me know. Can we talk? Dinner? Or anywhere you feel comfortable?" She agreed to meet at a quiet cafe they both loved near Central Park, a place they once frequented in simpler times. Christopher arrived first, wearing a charcoal suit but looking subdued. His eyes lit up with a bittersweet smile when Eleanor walked in, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, face free of makeup. She looked beautiful, if wary. They sat across from each other, tension crackling in the air. After an initial silence, Christopher spoke in a low voice. "I don't know where to begin, except to say I'm sorry. Truly." Elena sipped her tea, studying him. "I need more than apologies," she said calmly. "I need to understand why you did this, and what's changed." He exhaled, then told her everything. He spoke of his insecurities, feeling overshadowed by new tech giants and desperate to keep Syntratech at the cutting edge. Lexi offered him a kind of praise that felt intoxicating in the face of corporate pressures. "It became an escape," he admitted. "I told myself it was harmless, but I was lying. And once it went too far, I couldn't see a way out without losing funding, losing face, losing everything except the one thing I should have valued most, you." Elena watched tears pool in his eyes. This vulnerability was unlike the slick, corporate persona he'd become. A small flicker of empathy stirred within her. "And now?" she pressed. "I fired Lexi from her consultancy role," Christopher continued. "Cut off all ties. The board nearly ousted me, but I faced them with honesty. I'm refocusing on philanthropic work. Mark Cuban and Bill Gates reached out, offering moral support. They respected the humility of my approach, I guess." Elena studied him, uncertain. "You promise me you're done with her? No calls, no secret meets?" Christopher nodded, pressing his lips into a thin line. "I promise. She threatened to sabotage me, but I'd rather lose everything than lose you again." Emotion welled up in Elena's chest. She averted her gaze, fearing her tears might betray her. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she murmured, voice trembling. "But part of me wants to try." His eyes reflected relief and guilt. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, signing post-nuptial agreements that protect you financially. Anything. Just come home. Let's at least try to fix this." They spent hours talking, ignoring the curious glances of other patrons. Elena asked hard questions, demanded specifics, and Christopher answered openly, no longer hiding behind half-truths. She saw genuine remorse in his eyes, but also recognized that healing would be a gradual process. She was no longer naive. The love that once bound them had been battered, and only time would reveal if it could be rebuilt. Before parting, they agreed to another joint therapy session with Dr. Hill. "I'm not moving back into the penthouse yet," Elena said firmly. "I need my own space." Christopher nodded. "I understand." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for giving me a chance to speak." The autumn sun cast a gentle glow on them as they stood outside the cafe. They exchanged a tentative hug, filled with longing and sorrow. Elena walked away with uncertain steps, but her heart felt fractionally lighter. Sometimes the hardest step was the first one toward reconciliation. Yet, in the back of her mind, she remembered the damage Lexi caused and how easily Christopher succumbed. A single conversation won't fix everything. She hoped his actions would match his words in the coming weeks. If not, she would finalize her departure from the Stone Empire and never look back. The following weeks tested Christopher's resolve and Elena's willingness to forgive. They attended sessions with Dr. Marissa Hill, exploring the roots of Christopher's infidelity, the emotional fallout for Elena, and the practical steps required to rebuild trust. Progress was not linear. Some days ended in heated arguments, old wounds reopened by a careless word or memory. Elena rented a modest apartment in a quieter Manhattan neighborhood, refusing to rely on Christopher's wealth. She returned to her philanthropic work, meeting with organizations like Books for All and new library projects she'd initiated. Friends within these circles cautiously welcomed her back, tactfully avoiding direct questions about the rumored affair. Elena appreciated their discretion, though she could sense their sympathy and curiosity. Christopher, meanwhile, made concrete efforts to prove his sincerity. He reduced his work hours, delegating tasks to trusted executives so he could focus on therapy and philanthropic endeavors. He placed Elena's name on official Syntratech proposals for international literacy programs, crediting her as co-architect. When Bill and Melinda Gates invited them to a private dinner in Seattle to discuss a joint philanthropic venture, Christopher insisted Elena's input be central. One evening, after a particularly tense therapy session, Elena joined Christopher for a quiet dinner at a small Italian restaurant they once loved. For the first time since the affair began, he felt like he was no longer lying to the world or to himself. Upstate New York cast a serene backdrop for Elena's heartbreak. She spent her days trying to piece herself together, volunteering at a local shelter and helping her parents with chores around their modest home. The crisp autumn air and the changing foliage offered a quiet kind of therapy, but her nights remained sleepless. Weeks had passed since she stormed out of the Vermont cabin, yet the memory was still vivid. She wondered if Christopher's tears were genuine or just another manipulation. A swirl of conflicting emotions, love, anger, disappointment, kept her from making any definite decisions. One crisp morning, Elena woke to find a letter slipped under the front door, delivered by a private courier. It bore Christopher's neat handwriting. Heart-pounding, she carried the envelope to her childhood desk. She hesitated before opening it, steeling herself for another round of heartbreak. Yet, as she read Christopher's words, something in her chest tightened. He laid out his soul, expressing shame for letting Lexi manipulate him and letting greed overshadow the love they once shared. He mentioned the emergency board meeting, how he'd admitted his failings, cut ties with Lexi, and reaffirmed his philanthropic focus. His plea for a second chance radiated through the pages. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll spend every day proving I can be a better man. Elena pressed the letter to her chest, tears threatening to fall. She felt Christopher's torment and recognized a spark of sincerity. But could she trust him again? One letter doesn't erase months of deceit, she reminded herself. That afternoon, her friend Alicia Thompson dropped by, carrying grocery bags. They set about making a simple pasta dish together. At the kitchen table, Elena opened up about Christopher's letter. He's clearly remorseful, Alicia remarked, nibbling on a slice of bread. But is it enough? I don't know, Elena admitted, shoulders slumping. I believed him before, and he stabbed me in the back. How do I know this time is different? Alicia stirred the pasta sauce. You take it slow. Maybe you meet him face to face and see if his actions match his words. Elena bristled at the thought. She had left to protect her heart, yet curiosity and an ache for closure gnawed at her. If Christopher was truly making changes, she might find it in her to forgive, but not forget. Later that day, she received a call from Dr. Marissa Hill, the couple's therapist. Dr. Hill gently asked how she was coping and mentioned that Christopher had visited for a solo session. He seemed genuine in his regret, Eleanor. He admitted to being addicted to the thrill of success and attention, losing sight of what was real. Elena sank onto the sofa, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm so tired of feeling like I can't trust my own husband," she whispered. "Only you can decide what's next," Dr. Hill said softly. "But if there's a part of you that still cares, perhaps come in for one session. Just to talk, no commitments." That night, Elena sat by the window of her childhood bedroom, looking at the moonlit trees. She opened Christopher's letter again, noticing how he'd also included a note about new philanthropic strategies, referencing the possibility of establishing reading programs in schools across Africa, a cause dear to Elena's heart. He wrote, "Your vision always inspired me. I want to honor that again." A mixture of longing and caution tugged at her. She recalled the laughter they once shared, the passion that united them, the countless nights brainstorming ways to make the world better. The question remained, was that man still there, buried beneath the mistakes? Finally, Elena made a decision. She would return to the city, not to reconcile blindly, but to look Christopher in the eye and see if he truly had changed. If so, maybe they could rebuild their foundation on honest ground. If not, she'd walk away for good. She'd arranged to see Dr. Hill together, at least for closure. With her heart in turmoil, she packed a small bag the following morning. The journey back to Manhattan began, each mile heavy with hope and uncertainty. The city skyline loomed into view as Elena's train pulled into Grand Central Terminal. Anxiety surged within her. Manhattan, once her glamorous playground, now felt like a battleground strewn with painful memories. Yet she pressed on, determined to confront Christopher and her own unresolved feelings. She checked into a small boutique hotel in Midtown, avoiding the penthouse she once called home. After freshening up, she called Christopher, letting him know she was in the city. His breath caught audibly. "Elena, thank you for letting me know. Can we talk? Dinner? Or anywhere you feel comfortable?" She agreed to meet at a quiet cafe they both loved near Central Park, a place they once frequented in simpler times. Elena felt both gratitude and lingering caution. Afterwards, Christopher invited Elena to see the penthouse, where he claimed to have made changes. She hesitated, recalling the painful memories in those gleaming marble halls, but curiosity propelled her. Entering the penthouse, she noticed immediate differences. The once cluttered study, where Christopher kept piles of investment proposals, was reorganized, featuring a corner dedicated to philanthropic planning. Walls that formerly displayed expensive abstract art were now lined with framed photos of their philanthropic trips, helping children in Haiti, planting community gardens in Detroit, inaugurating libraries in underfunded areas. Christopher led her to the living room, where a simple bouquet of sunflowers rested on the coffee table. "I'm prepared to step down as CEO if the board demands it," he said softly. "My priorities have changed." A hush fell between them, broken only by the faint hum of the heater. Elena felt her heart swell with conflicting emotions. Love for the man he once was, hope for the man he could be, and fear of repeating a cycle of betrayal. She placed her coat on a chair, walking slowly to the panoramic windows. Snow swirled outside, white flakes drifting against the glass. She sensed Christopher approaching, his presence warm behind her. Gently, he took her hand. "Will you stay?" he asked, voice trembling. Elena closed her eyes, letting the quiet envelop them. "I don't have all the answers," she whispered, "but I'm willing to try. We rebuild from the ground up. If I sense even a hint of deception—" "You won't," he said firmly, voice brimming with regret, and determination. Tears brimmed in Elena's eyes, yet a soft smile curved her lips. She turned to face him, letting her free hand rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart. Then let's see if we can create something new from the ashes of our mistakes. They embraced, a hesitant but hopeful reunion under the snowy Manhattan skyline. Both knew the road ahead would be challenging. Lexi Harrington might still lurk in the shadows, the board's faith could waver, and old scars could flare at any sign of trouble. But for now, in that quiet, softly lit living room, they allowed themselves to believe in the possibility of a second chance, one forged through honesty, empathy, and the enduring power of love. Thank you for experiencing The Billionaire lied to his wife for his mistress, but when his wife left, he panicked. This story captures the tumultuous journey of love, betrayal, and the hard path to redemption. Christopher Stone learned that all the riches in the world mean nothing without genuine commitment and honesty. Elena Monroe Stone discovered her own resilience, showing that walking away can sometimes be the only way to reclaim one's self-worth, and that second chances only matter if real change follows. If you found yourself intrigued by this emotional saga and its message of forgiveness and renewal, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to bring you more captivating stories of heartbreak, hope, and the unbreakable spirit that keeps love alive. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more inspiring dramas that speak to the very heart of human relationships.